And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Martin Wallace game. Now, many of you may be thinking, oh great, a heavy economic Euro game, but actually we're going to take a look at something a little out of the norm, and you've probably seen it before, but we're going to take a look at Discworld, Ankh-Morpork, which is based on a series of books about a magical world in which the world is on a disc riding on the back of a turtle. Now, this is a little bit out of his normal comfort zone. It's going to be a fantasy-based game. It's not so much, heavy economic as it is a lighthearted, family-ish style game. It's going to play anywhere between 2 and 4 players. Probably about 11 up, and it's only going to take about an hour, maybe even a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more, depending on how fast your players play. But the whole goal here, well, that's the thing, is that there's variable goals. Each player is going to have a secret objective they're trying to accomplish, whether it's gaining a certain amount of money, or getting into a certain number of areas on the board, or simply just making sure that nobody else accomplishes their goal before the deck of cards runs out. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you get inside this box. It's important to note that there are 3 versions of this game. There is a lower level version, basically a release from Mayfair Games. I think I have it somewhere on my shelves. We have a middle level edition, which is this one here. This is going to be called the Collector's Edition. And then there's a deluxe edition, which comes with really nice resin figures. That is not this one. But we're going to look at the middle range edition. There's not too many differences from the lower end edition. We'll see how it plays, and then we'll come back here and we'll get my final opinions on it. So here you can see the components and board for Discworld. And what you're looking at here is the town of Ankh-Morpork divided into different regions. 1 through up to 12 with 7A. There is no 8 in the Discworld universe because it's an unlucky number. So we have 7A instead, and correspondingly we have a 12-sided die with the numbers 1 through 12 and 7A on the die replacing 8. Each player is going to have a secret goal that they're trying to accomplish in this town. And you're going to shuffle these up, and you're going to deal them out, but you're going to look at them when you get them, and you're going to have a secret roll. So we have the Dragon King of Arms, and it says if at the start of your turn, the number of trouble markers on the board equals or exceeds the number that occurs between 7 and 9, then the game ends immediately and you would be the winner. So in this case, if you have this one and there are 8 trouble markers on the board, or 7A trouble markers on the board, which come up from conflicts, I guess is the right word, within the board, then you will be the winner. So you're trying to get trouble out onto the board. Or if you're Commander Vimes, you simply want to have the deck of cards run out of cards, and if that happens, you're the winner. Or we have Lord Rust here, who says, if at the start of your turn you have clear control of a certain number of areas dependent on the number of players, you're going to be the winner. Or you have Lord Salachi here, which is the same thing if you have clear control of a certain number of areas. So some of them are the same. Cryophase here wants to have $50 during your turn. At the start of your turn, if you have $50 or $50 in value, you're going to win. So you get the idea. Everyone's going to have their own goal that is hidden and nobody knows what you're going for. Each player is also going to have 5 cards in their hand, and on their turn they're going to play a card from their hand and do what the card says. Now, what the card says is going to have several different regions on it. So you're going to have a region at the top with some icons, and then you're going to have a region down below with some text on it. These icons always refer to things that you can do, although one icon will refer to something that you must do. So you're going to have a hand of cards, and they're going to affect the game in several ways. So for example, here we have the Shonky Shop, and at the top you can see there are 2 icons. There's the scroll, which refers to the text down below, and then there's a building. So the scroll means you may do the text on the card. And the text on the card says, discard as many cards as you wish, and then take $1 for each card that you discarded. So this is going to be a way to get money. If your goal is to get money, this may be a good way to do so. Little neat thing to note is the money here is Wallace bucks, or whatever you want to call it. They have the head on them, and they're the nice wooden tokens. But you could play this card and take that effect. And then after that, since it has the building on it, you have the option of buying a building in an area where you currently have a presence. Now, at the beginning of the game, you're going to start with pieces in several different areas. You will start with pieces in the Dolly Sisters, the Scours, and the Shades. And each player will have a piece there, so let's say yellow has their pieces there as well. And for this, there is going to be trouble out on the board in the form of these trouble markers. This happens when anybody places a piece into an area that already has a piece regardless of color. So in this case, you cause trouble by coming into somebody else's district. Now, in order to build that building, you're going to have to pay the cost located on that sector. So you'll see here the cost to build the building in the Dolly Sisters is 6, in the Shades is 6, and also in the Scours is 6. Convenient they all start as 6s. And each building is going to have that value, the 6 on it, and they're going to have a special ability. So let's say, for example, you wanted to build the Dolly Sisters, which is Region 1. You would pay $6, and on here it has an ability. It says once per turn, you can pay $3 and place one of your minions in Dolly Sisters or an adjacent area. So this is a way to get more guys out onto the board. If you own this building, once per turn, you can turn in 3 money, and you would be able to put a guy out onto the board. Now, you also get a building, which is important, because whoever has the most wooden pieces in an area has control of that area, which is important for a different goal. One of these goals is to control a certain number of areas. So right now, if Green were to build this building, they would have control of that area, and they would have the ability to pay $3 from their supply. Maybe they return $3. And they go and they put out another minion on their turn. Maybe they want to place it in the Unreal Estates, which is adjacent. Now they have control of the Unreal Estates as well. Now, one thing to note is that this wouldn't actually be a possible move because you cannot build a building anywhere where there's trouble. So in this case, you'd have to first remove this trouble marker through some game effect in order to build a building. So really you couldn't do this on your turn. You wouldn't be able to get this special effect of placing a guy next door, but I was trying to show you a general idea. Other cards are going to have different things written on them. So, for example, let's take a look at a different card in the same player's hand. We have the peeled nuts here. It has absolutely no effect. It's a dead card in your hand, so these are going to exist. We have another card here, Mr. Bent, which has the icon for the text at the top, and then it says you may play another card. That's what that icon means. But down here, Mr. Bent says, place this card in front of you and take a loan of $10 from the bank. At the end of the game, you must pay back $12 or lose 15 points. So you need to get rid of these loans. You actually can't win the game while you have a loan. We have the Royal Mint, which simply says you can build a building and you can get $5. We have the Duckman, which says move a minion belonging to another player from one area to an adjacent area. Now this is important. If you were to play this card, you could move, for example, this yellow minion to an adjacent area, the Unreal Estate. And anytime you remove a minion from an area, the trouble marker is going to go with it. So if you were to do this, this trouble marker would vanish, and then maybe on a future turn you could build that building that I showed you earlier. There are other cards that have different effects. So for example, we have Mr. Pin and Mr. Tulip here. And what this does here, it has this skull and crossbones on it. This means that you can remove a minion from an area with a trouble marker. So you simply, if this guy was still here, you could just kill off this yellow minion by using this card because you're in the area, and you can just kill him off and send him back to his main player's area. At the same time, that would remove the trouble marker from the board because you moved a guy away from another person. We also have the place a minion icon. So this simply lets you place a minion onto the board in an area adjacent to where you already have one, or an area where you already have one present. So, for example, I could place in the Dolly Sisters, or Dragon's Landing, Unreal Estate, Knapp Hill, or any of these areas adjacent here, and there are some that are adjacent across a river. So after you've done this, you're going to play your cards, or cards if you can play the multiple card things. Then you're going to draw back up to your hand limit of 5. Now there's one icon that we haven't gone over yet, and that is going to be the Chaos icon. Actually, there's two icons. There's one here that looks like this. It's a little pink shield that lets you remove a trouble marker from the board. That's all it does, is remove a trouble marker. And then there's going to be the Chaos icon, if I can find a card with it on it, which is going to have a random event. Here we go. We have Rincewind, who is the focus of many of the Discworld books. He has this star icon on it. You cannot choose to ignore this. Any of the other icons you can choose to ignore, not taking the effect, but this one you cannot. And what happens when this comes up, if you were to play this card out to the table, is you would reveal one of these random effect cards. It's an event, and it's going to do something. So for example, we have the Fire. It says roll the die to see where it starts. You then You then continue rolling to see if the fire spreads. And there's specific rules for this. But you would roll a die, and if there's a building in the area, it's going to set it on fire. and it would burn down, and then you'd roll to see if the next area has a building in it, or if it's an adjacent area with a building, and if it is, it's going to burn that one down, and so forth and so on, until it reaches the end condition for the fire. And there are all types of random events like this, so we have demons from the dungeon dimensions, and this is going to put demons onto the board, which are these guys here. And they essentially make it so that the area that they're in no longer counts for anything. It doesn't count its value, the buildings in it don't work, and no one has control, nothing. Some of the events will place trolls out, which are essentially neutral minions, which are going to count for control. So if we're over here, and there happen to be 2 trolls on the board, now neither of these players has control because the neutral player would control that area. And essentially you're going to keep on in this manner until one player manages to either reach their victory condition, getting 50 money, or controlling a certain number of areas, or just simply being in a certain number of areas, with other players trying to guess what the person's objective is and stop them. So once somebody reaches their objective, that player, at the beginning of their turn, likely is going to reveal their card and show that they've won the game. Alternatively, you're going to play until this deck runs out, at which point either Commander Vimes will win, or you will count victory points according to control of areas and influence of different pieces, and so forth and so on. So there are 2 different ways for this to end. Essentially, one player accomplishes their goal, or nobody accomplishes their goal and you score based on victory points. Either way, you'll have one clear winner at the end of the game, and that player will be the person who is now the most influential in Ankh-Morpork. And there you have it. That is Discworld Ankh-Morpork by Martin Wallace. Now, the game is a good game overall. I do have a couple of criticisms with it. But first, let's go on to the good sides. The good sides, it plays really quickly. I do definitely like the variable player roles or variable player goals. I like the simplicity of draw a card, play a card, do the effects, and simply continue on from there. You can follow certain aspects of the rules, or of the cards. You can ignore certain aspects of the cards, and you continue your turns on. Nobody's really got a lot of downtime. You draw that card, you play your card, you do whatever it says, you continue on until somebody reaches their goal or the card deck runs out. Now, if nobody has that final goal of preventing everybody else from winning by the time the deck runs out, then they have the backup point scoring mechanic, which is kind of nice. At the same time, I do have those criticisms, as I said. The game is a little light for my tastes. Now, that's not a criticism in and of itself. But on top of that, I'm not entirely sure of the amount of replayability of the game. We've played several times, and each time you play, I think you get a little more bored with it, which is not always something that I'm looking for in my game. As a matter of fact, it's not ever something I'm looking for in my games. I'm looking for replayability. I'm looking for something that keeps me interested, and this doesn't seem to have that quality. With that said, it's a decent enough light to very, very low medium weight game. One that you can play very quickly, and one that can almost fill a filler type slot. It's not long, but it's not particularly short. And one that I think is definitely an audience for, especially if you're into the novels. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely check out Discworld Ankh-Morpork. Not a fantastic game, but one that I think definitely has its spot in a lightweight collection.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find the latest board game news at Dicetowernews.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Fun Again Games, the world's best game source. Fun Again Games has over 5,000 games available. Check them out at funagain.com.